land of Oo is filled with wonders, mysteries, and strange creatures, but few are as ancient and terrifying as the Lich. A being of pure darkness, he is not just a villain, but a force of destruction, existing solely to end all life. Legends say the Lich is eternal, a whisper of death that has lurked in the shadows since the dawn of time. His voice is hollow, his presence chilling, and his goals unchanging. Unlike other foes Finn and Jake have faced, the Lich is different, silent, patient, and unstoppable. But where did he come from? How did he rise to power? And what ultimately became of this harbinger of doom? Tonight, we will journey through his entire story, from his origins in the chaos of war to his final, unexpected fate. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the tale of the Lich unfold. Long before the land of Oo became what it is today, long before Finn and Jake roamed its strange and magical landscapes, there was a time of ruin. A time when the world was not yet the colorful and whimsical place we know, but a land consumed by war, fire, and devastation. It was during this chaos, at the very moment when life teetered on the brink of total annihilation, that something ancient and terrible was born: the Lich. The story of the Lich's origin begins with the Mushroom War, a catastrophic event that reshaped the world forever. The war, fought between powerful human nations, unleashed weapons of mass destruction so terrible that they wiped out civilizations in an instant. Fire rained from the sky. Cities crumbled into dust. The land was scorched beyond recognition. And in the heart of it all, as the final nuclear explosion consumed what remained of the old world, something unimaginable happened. In the blast, among the wreckage of humanity, a dark and malevolent energy was set free. Some say it had always been there, lurking beneath the surface of existence, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Others believe it was created in that instant, born from the sheer magnitude of destruction. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: when the final bomb fell, something evil took shape in the ashes. A single toxic crater remained where the explosion had been most intense. The very air around it seemed to shimmer with an eerie glow. The ground blackened and lifeless. And in that desolation, the Lich came into existence. It did not crawl from the earth like a newborn creature, nor did it descend from the sky like a wrathful god. It simply was silent, motionless, waiting. The Lich had no need for birth, no need for flesh. It was a force, a concept given form. It did not hunger, nor did it thirst. It did not feel pain or sorrow. It had but one purpose, one singular drive that defined its entire being: the extinction of all life. For an unknown amount of time, it remained in that wasteland, gathering strength, growing in power. The land around it withered, corrupted by its presence. Trees twisted into skeletal husks. Rivers turned black and still. Any creature that wandered too close, whether insect, animal, or something else, simply ceased to be. The Lich did not kill in the way a beast kills its prey. It did not strike or tear or consume. Instead, life itself simply ended in its presence, like a candle snuffed out by an unseen hand. But the Lich was not content to remain in the ruins of the old world forever. It was patient, yes, but patience was only a means to an end. There was more life beyond the wasteland, thriving in distant lands untouched by the war. Creatures of all kinds, civilizations that had survived the destruction, kingdoms that had risen from the ashes. And the Lich knew as long as even a single life form remained, its work was not yet finished. It needed a way to spread its influence, to reach beyond the lifeless crater that had birthed it. And so, for the first time, it moved. Not with limbs, not with steps, but with sheer force of will. The air around it trembled. The land cracked beneath it. And slowly, like a shadow stretching across the earth, the Lich began its journey. The first signs of its presence were subtle. A creeping cold that spread through the forests. A whisper on the wind that carried no voice, but filled the heart with dread. The animals were the first to sense it. Birds fell silent. Wolves howled at nothing. The very air seemed to grow heavier, as if the world itself recognized the approach of something ancient and unnatural. And then came the dreams. For those sensitive to magic, the presence of the Lich was not merely felt, it was experienced. Wizards, seers, and those attuned to the unseen forces of the world began to have visions. Dark, terrible visions of death, of the world reduced to a lifeless void. Some awoke screaming, unable to shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered long after their eyes had opened. Others refused to sleep at all, fearing what they might see if they closed their eyes again. The most powerful of these visions came to a legendary hero, Billy. Billy was known throughout the land as a warrior of unmatched skill, a protector of the innocent. He had faced monsters, tyrants, and creatures of unimaginable power. But nothing had ever filled him with the same kind of dread as the vision of the Lich. In his dreams, he saw darkness creeping across the world, swallowing entire kingdoms, leaving only silence in its wake. He saw himself standing against it, sword in hand, fighting with all his strength, and yet, despite his efforts, the darkness continued to spread. Billy awoke with a start, his heart pounding. He did not know what he had seen, only that it was real, that something was coming, and it was coming soon. The night was still. The wind had died down, leaving only an eerie silence in its place. Billy sat up in his bed, his breath heavy, his hands clenched into fists. The dream had felt so real. Too real. He had faced many evils before, but this was different. This was not just another monster to slay. This was something deeper, something older, something beyond anything he had ever encountered. Billy knew that dreams could sometimes be more than just dreams. Prophecies, warnings, whispers from forces unseen. And this one felt like a warning, a message, sent not just to him, but to the world itself. Something was coming, something that could not be ignored. He rose from his bed, his muscles tense, his instincts screaming at him to act. He had to find out what this vision meant, had to uncover the truth before it was too late. Billy gathered his things, strapped his sword to his back, and set off toward the distant mountains where the ancient mystics dwelled. If anyone knew what this dream meant, it would be them. The journey was long, the path winding and treacherous, through dense forests, over raging rivers, across barren plains. But Billy did not waver. He moved with purpose, with urgency, driven by the lingering weight of his vision. And all the while, in the back of his mind, he felt it. A presence. Distant, but undeniable. Something shifting. Something awakening. Far from Billy's path, deep in the heart of a forgotten wasteland, the Lich stirred. It had been waiting, watching, lingering in the shadows of existence. It had no need for haste. Time meant nothing to it. Only the outcome mattered, and the outcome would always be the same. Life was a sickness, a mistake in the fabric of reality, something that should not be. And the Lich. The Lich was the cure. For centuries, it had remained still, content to let the world forget. But now, it was time. A single breath of wind swept through the lifeless land, a whisper of movement in a place where nothing should stir. The ground cracked. The sky darkened. And from the shadows, it opened its eyes. Billy felt it. Not with his senses, but with something deeper, something primal. A shift in the air, a tremor in the very fabric of existence. He did not know how, but he knew the Lich had awakened, and it was coming. The mystics had felt it too. Long before Billy arrived, they had gathered in their sacred halls, speaking in hushed tones, their faces pale. They had foreseen this moment, but even their ancient wisdom had not prepared them for the weight of its reality. When Billy reached them, they did not need to ask why he had come. They already knew, and they did not hesitate. There was no time for riddles, no time for cryptic messages or veiled warnings. Only truth, only urgency. The Lich was awake. Its influence was spreading, and if nothing was done, it would consume everything, every kingdom, every soul, every last flicker of life. Billy clenched his fists, his heart steady, his resolve firm. He had faced monsters before, but this time, he was not sure if a sword would be enough. The mystics told him of an ancient power, one buried deep beneath the ruins of the old world. A power forged in the earliest days of time, when existence itself was still taking shape. A power that might stand against the Lich. But it was not easily found. It lay hidden, protected, sealed away for a reason. For while it had the potential to destroy great evil, it also carried a terrible risk. In the wrong hands, it could unravel the very balance of the world. Billy did not hesitate. If there was even a chance, a single chance, to stop what was coming, he had to take it. The mystics gave him their blessing, but their eyes were filled with sorrow, for they knew the truth. Even if Billy succeeded, even if he found this power and wielded it against the Lich, there were no guarantees, no promises of victory, only the grim reality that he was walking towards something no hero had ever faced before, something older than time, something that did not fear death, because it was death itself. Billy set out once more, his path leading him to the forgotten ruins, where the fate of the world would soon be decided. And behind him, far beyond the mountains, beyond the forests and the rivers and the lands of the living, the Lich moved. Silent, relentless, unstoppable. Its time had come. And soon, life would be no more. The ruins lay before him, silent and ancient, buried beneath centuries of dust and decay. Once long ago, this place had been something more, a city, a kingdom, a home to those who had lived in the old world. Now it was nothing but remnants, crumbling stone and shattered towers, forgotten by time itself. But beneath this ruin, hidden far below the surface, was the power Billy sought. A power that might stand against the Lich, if it still existed, if it had not faded, lost to the ages, if it was not already too late. Billy stepped forward, his boots kicking up dust, his sword heavy on his back. The air here was thick, heavy with something unseen, something that pressed against his skin, whispered at the edges of his mind. A warning. A presence. He was not alone. The ruins were vast, a maze of broken pathways and sunken corridors. Each step took him deeper, down crumbling staircases, through archways barely standing, past walls covered in strange marking symbols long forgotten. They told a story, a history lost to time. But Billy did not stop to read. He could feel it now, and the energy below, pulling him forward, guiding him through the dark. Then he saw it. A great stone door, half buried in the earth, covered in runes that pulsed faintly, as if alive. This was it. The seal. The last barrier between him and the power hidden within. Billy stepped closer, reaching out a hand, his fingers brushing against the cold surface. At his touch, the runes flared, a soft glow spreading outward, filling the cracks, spilling across the stone like liquid light. Then, a deep sound rumbled through the ruins. The door began to shift, stone grinding against stone, dust falling like rain, and slowly, inch by inch, it began to open. A rush of cold air spilled out, and carrying with it the scent of earth, of time, of something ancient waking from its slumber. Billy took a breath, stepped forward, and crossed the threshold. The chamber beyond was vast, a great cavern hidden beneath the ruins, its walls lined with glowing crystals, casting an eerie, shifting light. And at the center, resting on a pedestal of black stone, was the source of it all. A crown. Simple, unassuming, yet radiating with power so strong, Billy could feel it hum in his bones. This was it. The weapon he had been seeking. Not a sword, not a shield, but something far more dangerous. A relic of the old world, forged in the final days before the fall. A crown meant not for a king, but for a warrior, a protector, or perhaps a destroyer. Billy approached slowly, his heartbeat steady and his mind racing with questions. Could he truly wield this power? Would it be enough? Would it be too much? He reached out, his fingers hovering just above the metal, feeling the cold energy that pulsed from within. Then he touched it. The moment his fingers made contact, a shockwave rippled through the cavern. The crystals flickered. The air trembled. And in his mind a voice, not words, not speech, something deeper, older, a feeling, a presence, a knowledge beyond his own, a glimpse into the past, a vision of what had come before, and what was still to come. He saw the Mushroom War, the flames, the destruction, the moment when the world was torn apart. He saw the birth of the Lich, the darkness rising from the ashes, spreading like a disease, twisting the very fabric of existence. He saw the battles that followed, the heroes who had tried to stop it, the countless lives lost, and the terrible truth. The Lich could never be destroyed, only delayed, only held back. Billy gasped, staggering backward, his chest heaving. The vision faded, but the weight of it remained. His power. It would not defeat the Lich, but it could imprison it, seal it away for a time. Perhaps for centuries, perhaps forever, or perhaps only for as long as the world allowed. Billy clenched his fist, his resolve hardening. It would have to be enough. It had to be enough, because the Lich was coming, and the battle for existence was about to begin. Billy stood in the silent chamber, his breath steady, his fingers still tingling from the crown's power. The visions had shaken him, but there was no time to dwell on them. The Lich was awake, and every second that passed brought it closer. He lifted the crown from its pedestal, feeling its weight, the strange coldness of the metal, the energy humming beneath his fingertips. This was not an ordinary object. It was alive, aware, watching him, waiting. Billy took a slow breath, steadying himself, then placed the crown upon his head. A sudden shock surged through his body, a jolt of energy, like lightning crawling through his veins. His vision blurred, his thoughts scattered. The cavern around him flickered and changed. He was no longer standing in the ruins. He was somewhere else. A dark, endless void. Silent. Still. But he was not alone. A figure loomed before him, its shape shifting, twisting, flickering like a shadow against firelight. Not a man. Not a beast. Something older. Something beyond description. And when it spoke, it did not use words. It used understanding. A feeling that reached into Billy's mind, wrapped around his thoughts, and whispered truths he had never known. You seek to stop it. You seek to fight the inevitable. You know this is futile. Billy clenched his fists. He did not answer, but the figure already knew. It could feel his resistance, his defiance, his stubborn hope. And it laughed, a soundless, echoing thing that rattled through Billy's bones and sent chills down his spine. Do you not see? Do you not understand? The Lich is not a force to be stopped. It is not a thing that can be defeated. It is a truth, a fact of existence. It was before you. It will be after you. You cannot destroy what simply is. Billy's mind swirled with doubt. A deep, aching weight settled in his chest. Was this true? Was he truly fighting the impossible? Was this battle lost before it even began? No. He would not believe that. He refused to believe that. He had fought his whole life for those who could not fight for themselves. He had stood against darkness before. He had won. Even if this war was greater than anything he had faced, even if the enemy could not be destroyed, he would not stop. There was always a way. There had to be. Billy gritted his teeth, his hands tightening into fists. And for the first time, he spoke. I don't care if it can't be destroyed. I don't care if it's inevitable. As long as I can still stand, as long as I can still fight, I will. Silence. The figure did not move, did not shift, did not react. Then, very softly, it sighed. Then you are a fool. But you are the fool that is needed. Go. Take what you have learned. Face the darkness once more. And when it comes for you, remember my words. The void shattered. The darkness faded. Billy gasped as he was pulled back into reality, his knees hitting the cold stone floor of the cavern. His breath came fast, his chest rising and falling as the echoes of that voice lingered in his mind. He did not understand who or what he had spoken to, but it did not matter. The Lich was coming, and he had a war to fight. Billy rose to his feet, adjusting the crown on his head, feeling its power settle into him. The chamber around him seemed darker than before, the air colder, the presence of the Lich stronger. It knew what he had done. It knew where he was, and it was waiting. Billy turned, stepping out of the chamber, leaving the ancient ruins behind. This was no longer just his fight. This was the fight of every living thing in every corner of existence. The final battle between life and death. between hope and despair, between what should be and what must be. And deep in the distance, in the land of desolation, the Lich stirred. It smiled, without lips, without flesh, without warmth. It did not fear what was coming. It had waited too long for this, and soon it would all begin. The wind howled through the empty land, cold and sharp, whispering through the ruins like a breath from the past. Billy walked forward, his step steady, his mind clear. The crown on his head felt heavier now, as if the knowledge he carried had weight of its own. The Lich was out there, waiting, watching, patient as time itself, and Billy was walking straight into the storm. The ground beneath him was cracked, scarred by battles long forgotten. Each step felt like walking through history, through the remnants of those who had once fought this same fight. He was not the first, and he would not be the last. The sun hung low in the sky and casting long shadows over the land. Billy could feel it now, a shift in the air, a pull deep in his chest. Something was coming, something vast, something ancient. Then the earth trembled, a deep, slow rumble, rolling beneath his feet. The sky darkened, the wind died, and the world itself seemed to hold its breath. And in that silence, a voice, not spoken, not heard, felt. You wear the crown. You carry the burden. You walk toward your end. Billy did not stop, did not slow, did not falter. The shadows ahead twisted, stretched, gathered, until they were no longer just darkness, but something more, something alive, something endless. The Lich. It did not move, did not lunge, did not attack. It only watched, and smiled. A smile without lips, without warmth, without life. You are too late. You always were. You always will be. Billy gripped the hilt of his sword. The weight of it was nothing, compared to the weight of the moment. The Lich had waited for this, had seen this moment before. A cycle, repeating, forever. One warrior standing against the dark. One warrior falling. And the world left to crumble. Billy exhaled, slow and steady. He had seen the past. He had seen the future. But the future was not set. Not yet. Not as long as he still stood. The Lich raised one skeletal hand. A flicker of green light spilled from its fingertips. Cold, ancient, final. Billy did not wait. He moved, his sword flashing in the dying light, his feet finding solid ground where there was none. And in that moment, as steel met shadow, as light met dark, as history met the present, the battle began. And far away, in the places beyond time, something watched, something waited. Because no matter who won, no matter who fell, the cycle would start again. And the war would never truly end. The night was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made the world feel hollow, as if it had been emptied of life before anyone had time to notice. The wind had stopped. The trees stood still. Even the stars seemed frozen in place. Something was coming. Something old. Something hungry. In the heart of the kingdom, where the towers rose high and the streets pulsed with life, no one saw it at first. No one felt the shift in the air, the faint crackle of something had not meant to be here. Not until it was too late. A whisper. Not words. Not sound. Just a feeling. crawling through the bones of every living thing. A presence, pressing against the walls of existence, seeping through the cracks, slow to patient, inevitable. Then the first scream, sharp, brief, cut off too soon. A flicker of green light in the dark, a shadow stretching where it should not. And then nothing. The palace guards rushed toward the sound, armor clanking, torches burning, their voices sharp with fear. They found a man, kneeling in the street, his eyes empty, his breath shallow. His skin was pale, his lips slightly parted, his body frozen in place. But he was not dead. Not yet. He was listening, hearing something that no one else could. And then a whisper escaped his lips, soft, barely a sound. But it carried through the cold night air. It's here. The wind rushed back, but it was wrong. Not fresh, not clean, not natural. It carried something with it. Something foul. Something ancient. Something hungry. And then, as the guards stepped back, as fear gripped their hearts, as the stars above flickered like dying embers, the Lich stepped forward. Not walked, not appeared, stepped, as if it had always been there, just waiting to be noticed. Its form was long, thin, stretched beyond what should be possible. A figure made of shadow and bone, wrapped in a cloak that did not move in the wind. Its skull was bare, cracked, aged beyond time, but its eyes were the worst part. They were not eyes at all, just empty sockets, deep, endless, filled with a swirling green fire that burned without warmth, without mercy, without life. It raised one hand, fingers like brittle twigs curled with unseen power, and the kneeling man, the one who had whispered, "It's here," let out a shuddering breath, and then he stopped breathing. The guards stepped back. They had faced monsters before. They had fought battles. They had sworn to protect the kingdom against any threat. But this was something else. Something older than war. Something worse than death. The Lich did not speak. It did not move toward them. It did not need to. Because the moment they looked into its eyes, the moment they felt its presence, they knew. It was not here to fight. It was not here to rule. It was not here to take the kingdom, or the throne, or the crown. It was here for something far worse. It was here to end everything. A cold wind swept through the streets, carrying the last echoes of the man's breath away into the night. The guards did not scream, did not run, did not fight. Because deep down, in the part of the soul that knows, before the mind can understand, they realized the truth. They had already lost. The torches flickered. The air thickened. The Lich stood motionless, but its presence spread, stretching beyond the streets, beyond the palace, beyond the city itself. A quiet rot, seeping into the cracks of the world, slow, patient, unstoppable. The guards did not move, not by choice, but because something unseen held them in place. A weight pressed against their chests, cold fingers curling around their ribs, squeezing the breath from their lungs. One by one, they collapsed, not dead, not alive, suspended between moments, caught in the Lich's grasp, like flies trapped in amber. And then it spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in thought. A whisper inside their minds, coiling through their memories, slipping into places, that had never been touched before. A voice whose time without voice, a presence without form. There is no struggle. There is no fight. There is no war to be won. Only the truth. And the truth is this: all things must end. A single torch sputtered, its flame shrinking, dwindling, until only embers remained. The city shuddered. Not with an earthquake, not with force, but with something deeper, something unseen, something felt. In the homes, people stirred from their sleep, cold sweat clinging to their skin, though they did not know why. Children whimpered. Dogs growled at empty corners. Candles dimmed without a breeze. Something was changing. The very air had become heavier, as if the night itself was leaning in, watching, waiting. The Lich took another step forward. The sound was soft, barely more than a whisper. But the ground beneath its feet cracked. The stones curled inward, as if recoiling from its touch. The very earth seemed to shrink away. And then, from the darkness, another whisper. A voice, small, shaking, but still standing. A priest, dressed in gold and white, stepping into the street with trembling hands. His robes billowed, though there was no wind. His breath was unsteady, but his eyes were filled with fire. You will not take this place. You will not take these people. You will not have this world. The Lich turned its head, slow, unnatural, like a marionette, with its strings pulled wrong. The fire in its sockets flared, burned brighter, pulsing, like a second heartbeat. The priest did not waver. He held his staff firm, his voice steady. We have seen your kind before. We have faced the darkness before, and we have survived. The Lich did not reply, not with words, but with silence. A silence so deep, it swallowed the world whole. The priest gasped, his chest tightening, his vision blurring. A force pressed against him, cold, merciless, digging into his bones. But he did not fall. He did not kneel. He had sworn an oath to his gods, to his people, to himself, and he would not break it. He raised his staff. A golden light flared from its tip, bright, blinding, cutting through the dark like a blade through flesh. The Lich did not move, did not flinch, did not burn. Instead, it simply raised one hand, and the light died. The priest staggered, his strength draining, as if something unseen was pulling it from him, stealing it, feeding on it. His staff fell from his fingers, clattering against the stone. His knees hit the ground. His breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. The light inside him flickered, dwindled, faded. The Lich stepped closer, not hurried, not rushed, just inevitable. It loomed over him, shadow stretching, swallowing him whole. And then, very softly, it whispered, "You were wrong. You did not survive. You only delayed the inevitable. But now the end has come." The priest let out a shuddering breath. His vision blurred. The world tilted. His strength was gone. But he was not afraid. Not now. Not at the end. Because he had done what he had set out to do. He had stood. He had fought. And somewhere, someone had seen. Someone would remember. And someone would rise. As the Lich reached out, as the final breath left his lips, as the silence swallowed everything, a single bell rang in the distance. Soft, faint, but loud enough for the world to hear. And the war had begun. The bell's echo faded, swallowed by the endless night. The Lich did not turn, did not acknowledge the sound, but something in the air shifted. A ripple, too small to see, too vast to ignore. Far beyond the city walls, past the rivers, past the forests, deep in the mountains where the sky met the stone, an ancient door trembled. Sealed for centuries, forgotten by time, bound by those who had once known true terror. Now it stirred, a whisper in the dark, a call that should never have been answered. And slowly, the cracks began to spread. Back in the city, the Lich stood unmoving. The priest lay still, his final breath long gone, his body untouched, but his soul had been taken. Not torn, not devoured, simply gone, like a candle snuffed out. The guards, the people, all who had seen, they stood frozen, trapped in the weight of something they could not understand. Some tried to move, tried to scream, tried to fight, but there was no fight to be had. The battle had never begun. The war was already lost. And then, a single step, a single heartbeat, a single breath, in a world that had stopped breathing. From the shadows, wrapped in tattered robes, a figure emerged, hunched, shaking, but alive. Eyes filled with fire, with desperation, with the knowledge that this moment was all that remained. A scholar, a seer, a man who had spent his life searching for the stories that no one wanted to remember. He had read the prophecies. He had traced the warnings, the omens, the signs, and he knew this was the end, unless he could stop it. His voice was hoarse, his words dry, but they carried through the empty streets. A whisper, a prayer, a plea. The first mistake was letting you in. The second mistake was thinking you could be fought. The third mistake was forgetting what you really are. The Lich turned, slowly, like it had all the time in the world. Because it did. The seer took a step forward, then another. His hands trembled, but his eyes did not waver. He raised his voice, not in defiance, not in anger, but in understanding. You are not a warrior. You are not a king. You are not a god. You are the end, and you do not belong here. The Lich did not reply. The fire in its eyes did not flicker. The weight of its presence did not lessen. But the air shifted, just for a moment. A flicker, a pause, a hesitation, so small it could have been imagined. The seer saw it, and he knew this was his only chance. With shaking fingers, he reached into his robes, pulled out an object wrapped in cloth, held together by threads of gold and dust. A book, old, fragile, and filled with truths no one wanted to remember. He did not need to open it. The words had long been carved into his soul. The first time you came, you were cast back. The second time you came, you were bound. But now you walk free, and the world will fall, unless you are sent away once more. He unwrapped the cloth, and the moment the book was bare, the ground shook. The Lich did not move, did not react, but the flames in its eyes began to twist, to curl inward, to flicker. The book was older than kings, older than nations, older than time itself, written by hands that no longer existed, in a language that could no longer be spoken. But the seer knew the words, and he spoke them now, softly, firmly, desperately. language of endings, a language of beginnings, a language not meant for mortal tongues. The city trembled. The stars above burned brighter, then dimmed, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The Lich moved. For the first time. A shift, a tilt of the head, the slightest motion. But it was enough, because the seer had seen the records, had read the warnings, had studied the truth. The Lich could not be slain, could not be destroyed, could not be reasoned with, but it could be sent away. It could be banished. The words poured from his lips, faster now, stronger, as the air thickened, as the fire around the Lich began to twist, to bend, to resist. It stepped forward. 1 step, 2, 3. The ground beneath it cracked. The shadows rippled, and the city began to break. The seer's voice did not waver. His breath was ragged, his heart pounded, but he did not stop. He could not stop. Not now. Not when the words were already taking shape, unraveling the unseen threads that bound this world to the Lich's presence. The book trembled in his hands. Its pages fluttered, though there was no wind. The ink within them began to glow, as if remembering the power they once held. This was not just a text, not just a collection of knowledge. This was a lock, a seal, a prison, woven from words that could not be undone, once fully spoken. The Lich did not retreat, did not cower, did not break. But it did slow. Its fire no longer burned steady. It pulsed, flickered. The shadows around it began to twist, like something unseen was pulling it back. Something greater, something older, something even the Lich had no power over. The seer knew what he had to do, knew the cost, knew there was no turning back, and yet he hesitated for just a fraction of a second because he could feel it. The Lich's gaze upon him, not just watching, understanding. You think you win. You think your words are enough. You think you can cast me away like those before you did. But you do not know what they knew. You do not understand what they understood. You only delay what cannot be stopped. Endings cannot be erased, only postponed. The seer clenched his jaw, forced himself to ignore the voice, forced himself to keep speaking. Each word heavier than the last, each syllable pulling at the edges of reality, each breath carving a deeper divide between this world and the void beyond. The Lich took another step, and the city shattered, not with fire, not with war, but with silence. The stones beneath their feet collapsed into dust. The sky above rippled like water. Buildings and streets, people, all of it wavered, like a reflection in glass before the mirror cracked. This was the price of speaking the words. The world itself, bending, breaking, splitting apart as the seal took hold. But the seer did not stop. His voice rose above the collapsing city, above the weight of the void pressing in, above the silence that sought to swallow everything whole. And for the first time, the Lich hesitated, not because of fear, not because of pain, but because the door was closing, the chains and were reforging. The end was being undone. A final word, a final breath, a final moment. And then the Lich was gone, not destroyed, not defeated, just elsewhere. The air was still. The silence stretched. And in the ruins of the city, the seer fell to his knees, his body broken, his mind unraveling. but he had done it. For now, for this age, for this world. But deep in the mountains, where the sky met the stone, where an ancient door had once trembled, the cracks were still there, waiting, growing. Because no matter how strong the seal, the end always finds a way back. The silence stretched, unmoving, unbroken. Not the calm after a storm, but the emptiness of something unfinished, something waiting. The seer knelt in the ruins, his breath shallow, his hands still clutching the book, as if letting go would unravel everything he had just done. His body ached, his mind burned, but he did not move, because he knew it was not over. Far beyond the city, past the rivers, past the forests, past the mountains, where the door had trembled, there was still a shadow, still a whisper, still a hunger that could not be silenced by mere words, because words did not kill the inevitable. They only delayed it. The sky was different now. Not broken, not torn, just watching. The stars, faint and distant, no longer shone as brightly, as if they too had seen what had happened here, as if they too knew what would come next. The Lich had been sealed, again. But the seer had heard its final words, and they had not been a threat, not a curse, not a promise of destruction, just a fact. The end cannot be erased, only postponed. In time, another would stand where he stood now. Another would speak the words. Another would try to bind what cannot be bound. But one day, the words would falter, the chains would fail, and the Lich would not return because it would have never left. The seer closed his eyes, listened to the wind, moving through the shattered streets, listened to the silence. That was not truly silent, because somewhere, in a place no one could reach, the Lich still listened too, waiting, watching, knowing that this world here would one day be his again. And when that day came, there would be no words left to stop it. The night stretched on, long and deep, and somewhere far away, the cracks in the door began to spread once more. The wind carried no sound, no whispers, no cries, only the weight of something unseen, pressing against the edges of the world, sinking into the cracks that no one knew were there. Possession does not begin with force, not with chains, not with battle. It begins with a thought, a whisper, a single doubt planted in the mind like a seed waiting to grow. The Lich did not need to return to be present. It did not need form to have influence. It only needed one thing, a mind willing to listen. Deep within the kingdom, beyond the shattered city, beyond the ruins, where the seer had spoken the words, there was a boy, young, curious, unaware. He had heard the stories, told in hushed voices in flickering candlelight, by those who swore they were only myths. He had seen the fear hidden in the eyes of the elders, had watched their hands tremble when they spoke of the Lich, as if merely saying its name might bring it back. But he did not fear. He did not tremble. He only wondered. It started as a dream, soft, distant, a voice calling from somewhere far away, not urgent, not demanding, just there, waiting. The boy did not speak of it, did not question it, because at first it was nothing more than a passing thought, a strange feeling that lingered only in the moments before waking. But then the voice came closer, Not in words, not in commands, but in a presence, a warmth that should not have been warm, a shadow that did not feel cold, something just beyond understanding, but never beyond reach. And the boy, young as he was, reached back. The first mistake unto 20 was curiosity. The second mistake was trust. The third mistake was thinking he was still himself. The Lich did not take. It did not steal. It did not invade. It did not have to. It only had to wait, to let the boy invite it in, to let the whispers become thoughts, to let the thoughts become truths. And once they were truth, they could not be undone. The boy changed, slowly. At first, it was only in the way he spoke. The way he looked at things a second too long. The way he asked questions no child should ask. But then, it was more. He no longer dreamed, because he no longer needed to. The voice was with him always, not haunting, not tormenting, just there, watching, guiding, shaping, until the boy was no longer a boy. And when he finally opened his mouth to speak, his words were no longer his own. The words came slowly at first, soft, measured, like a whisper drifting through empty halls, settling into corners where no one would notice. No one except those who were already listening. The boy did not realize he had changed. Not at first. Not when his voice grew quieter. Not when his thoughts lingered too long on things he never cared for before. Not when his reflection looked just a little different each time he gazed into the water. But others noticed. They saw the way his eyes darkened when he thought no one was watching. The way his laughter had become something hollow. The way his presence felt heavier than it should have. He did not speak of the dreams anymore, because they were no longer dreams. They were memories, not his own, not from this world, but real all the same. The whispers became words. The words became thoughts. The thoughts became actions. And the boy, who was once only a boy, became something more. The elders watched him with cautious eyes. They spoke in hushed tones, their fear buried beneath the layers of denial. "It is nothing," they said. "He is just growing. He is only curious. It is only a phase." But deep down, they knew that something watched through his eyes. Something old, something patient, something that had not spoken in ages, but was speaking now. The boy did not fight it. Not because he was weak, not because he was unaware, but because the voice was no longer something separate, no longer something to resist. It had become a part of him, a presence in his bones, a shadow in his breath, a knowing in his heart that could not be undone. The first time he spoke the words, the world did not shatter. No fire rained from the sky. No great terror awoke. Not yet. But the air shifted. The trees bent toward him, as if listening. The ground beneath his feet hummed with something unseen. And in the silence between breaths, the Lich smiled. Not with lips, not with flesh, but with the quiet certainty that it no longer needed a body. It had a voice. It had a vessel. And soon, it would have a world. The boy stood at the edge of the village, still, silent, listening. The wind curled around him, pulling at his clothes, but he did not shiver. The night stretched long and empty, but he did not blink. Because the whispers were no longer whispers. They were voices, clear, steady, calling him forward. He did not remember walking, but his feet carried him. Did not remember choosing, but the path had already been made. Did not remember deciding, but the weight of what he was had already settled. The trees parted before him, not bent, not broken, just moved, as if something unseen guided their branches away. The ground pulsed beneath his steps, not trembling, not shaking, just alive, aware, waiting. The village slept behind him, safe, unknowing, but not for long, because change never comes in a sudden storm. It does not arrive with fire and ruin. It seeps in, slow and gentle, like a hand resting on a shoulder, like a shadow stretching just a little longer than it should, like a thought that does not feel like your own until it is. The boy reached the clearing, a place forgotten, a place untouched, a place that should not be. But it had been waiting for him, and he, without knowing, had been waiting for it. He knelt, not because he was tired, not because he was weak, but because the weight of the moment pressed down on him, demanded his stillness, called for his surrender. The air thickened, not cold, not warm, just full, heavy with something unseen, something older than the trees, older than the land, older than time itself. And for the first time, the boy spoke, not with his voice, not with his words, but with the one that had been given to him, a voice that did not belong to flesh or bone, did not belong to this world or the next, did not belong to anything living, because it had never lived, only existed, waiting, watching, becoming. The first word was soft, the second was stronger, the third was power, and with each syllable, the world shifted, not breaking, not falling, just changing. Because power does not erupt, it unfolds. And in that moment, the boy was no longer a boy. Not entirely. Not yet. But soon. Very soon. The Lich did not force its will. It did not take control. It did not need to. Because the greatest trick of all was not in possessing the body. It was in shaping the mind. And the boy, without ever knowing, had already been shaped. The night deepened. The trees loomed taller. The wind carried no sound. Only stillness. Only waiting. The boy stood, not alone, but with something unseen. Something wrapped around him, woven through him, settled into the spaces where doubt had once lived. There was no fear, no hesitation, only purpose, only knowing. The whispers had guided him here, but they were no longer whispers. They were thoughts, they were instincts, they were truth. He raised a hand, not his own, not entirely. Fingers curled, steady, certain, as if they had always known this shape, as if they had always belonged to something greater. And in that moment, they did. A flicker, a shift, a pulse beneath his skin, like something waking, something stretching, something remembering. And then the world answered. The air thickened. The ground trembled, not from force, but from recognition, because the land knew. It had always known. This presence was not new, not unfamiliar. It had walked here before, long ago, in another form, through another vessel. And now, it walked again. The boy's breath was steady. His heart was not his own. It beat slower, deeper. not to keep him alive, but to remind the world that he had become something else. The village still slept, unaware, unprepared, because possession is not sudden. It is not violent. It is not a battle of wills. It is gentle, patient, inevitable, like a tide rising, like roots spreading beneath the earth, like a whisper that never truly leaves. The boy turned, but his shadow did not follow. It stretched long behind him, reaching, curling, shifting in a way no shadow should. Because it did not belong to him. Not anymore. It belonged to something else. Something waiting. Something watching. Something that had finally found its voice again. The Lich did not rejoice, did not celebrate, did not declare its return. Because it had never left, it had only waited. And now, with a vessel willing to listen, it could do what it did best. Not destroy, not conquer, not yet. First, it would whisper. The night did not break. It did not shift. It did not resist. Because the world had already changed. The boy took a step forward. Not hesitant, not uncertain. His feet knew the path, even if he did not. Because this was not the first time it had been walked. Not the first time. A vessel had been chosen. Not the first time. A whisper had become a voice. The village lay beyond the trees. Quiet. Unaware. But the air carried something new now. Something woven between the branches. Something threading through the silence. Something watching. Waiting. Becoming. The boy's mind was no longer his own. Not fully. Not yet. But the Lich was patient. It did not need to take. It did not need to force. It only needed time. Because the greatest possession does not happen in an instant. It happens in the moments. Between thoughts. Between dreams. Between who you were and who you are becoming. The villagers whispered about him now. Not openly. Not loudly. But in the corners of their homes, beneath the flicker of candlelight, where they thought he could not hear. They spoke of the way his eyes lingered too long, the way his shadow moved when he did not, the way the wind seemed to bend around him, as if carrying something that was not meant to be carried. They did not understand, not yet, but they would, because the boy no longer dreamed. He no longer needed to. His thoughts were no longer his own. They no longer needed to be. His voice no longer belonged to him, because it belonged to something greater, something deeper, something endless. And so when he finally spoke, they did not recognize the sound, because it was not his voice. Not entirely. Not anymore. The first time he spoke, the ground trembled beneath his feet. The second time, the air grew heavy, thick with something unseen. The third time, the silence broke. Not with screams, not with fire, not with destruction, but with a whisper. Soft, patient, certain. A whisper, that had waited centuries to be heard again. A whisper that had never truly faded. A whisper that would spread, slowly, gently, until it was no longer just a whisper, but a truth. Unquestioned. Unstoppable. Inevitable. The boy smiled. Not his smile. Not anymore. Because the Lich did not destroy. Not yet. First, it would whisper. And soon, they would all listen. The air was thin, still, waiting. The boy stood at the edge of something unseen. Not a door, not a passage. Something older, something deeper. Something that had always been there, hidden beneath the skin of the world, waiting for the right hand, to pull it open. And now, that hand had arrived. The Lich did not need a key, did not need force, because power like this was not taken. It was understood. It was answered. It was inevitable. The boy did not resist. His feet moved without command. His breath came slow, steady, as if he had done this before. As if some part of him, some part of everything, already knew what was coming next. The ground beneath him was no longer solid. Not truly. Not entirely. It pulsed, deep and slow, like the heart of something vast, something waiting, something about to wake. The Lich had no eyes, but it saw. Had no hands, but it reached. Had no voice, but it whispered. And the world, the space between spaces, listened. There was no light, no flash, no violent tearing of reality. Only a moment, a breath, where the air trembled, the shadows bent, and the unseen space ahead of him became something else. The boy took a step forward, and the world let him go. The step did not land. There was no ground, no weight, no resistance, only motion, only falling, only moving towards something that had no name. The boy did not scream, did not reach, did not panic, because this was not falling, not truly, not entirely. This was shifting. This was stepping between one breath and the next into a space that should not exist. The air had no shape. The sky had no color. The world, if it could be called that, was not here, was not there. I was simply everything and nothing, all at once. The boy blinked, and the blink lasted forever. Opened his eyes, and time had not passed at all, because here, there was no time, no past, no future, only now, only always, only the endless stretch of what had been hidden until now. The Lich had not spoken, had not commanded, had not forced, because this place did not obey. It did not bow. It simply was. A ripple spread through the emptiness. Not air, not sound, just motion. Something waking, something aware, something watching. Because the Lich had not stepped into a void, it had stepped into the space between worlds, the unseen threads woven through existence, the dark spaces between thoughts, the whispers that had never been heard until now. The boy hovered, suspended, waiting for something. He did not yet understand, but the Lich did, because this was not the first time, not the first doorway, not the first vessel, only the next, only another. And soon, there would be more. The ripple faded, the silence deepened, and then the portal opened. The portal did not tear, did not break, did not shatter the space around it, because it had always been there, waiting, sleeping, hidden beneath the fabric of everything, woven between thoughts, between moments, between the breath of one world and the silence of the next. The boy did not move, did not need to, because the portal was not a place, not a door, not a path to be walked. It was a whisper, a thought, a presence that had always been. And now it had been seen. The air around him bent, slow, fluid, like ink spilling through water. Shapes formed, not solid, not clear, but shifting, changing, as if existence itself was trying to remember what it once had been. The Lich knew. It had always known. Because it had touched this place before, reached into it, pulled from it, let its influence seep through the cracks where the universe had grown weak. But now it would not rage. Now it would step through, fully, completely, without resistance, without hesitation, without limit. The void trembled, not in fear, not in warning, but in recognition, because the Lich was not intruding, not breaking through. It was simply returning. The boy exhaled, and the silence shattered, not with sound, not with chaos, but with movement, with possibility, with something vast, something endless, something hungry, stirring awake. The portal widened, not outward, not across, but deeper, into places unseen, into places untouched, into the quiet corners of existence, where rules no longer held meaning, where time had no grip, where the boundaries between worlds had already begun to fade. The Lich did not smile, did not celebrate, because this was not an achievement, not a victory. It was simply the next step, and soon it would take another, and another, until nothing remained untouched, until nothing remained unchanged, until every world, every mind, every whisper belonged to it. The portal pulsed, slow, steady, like a heartbeat, like a thought forming in the vast quiet of existence. Not a window, not an entryway, but a wound, a crack in the fabric of what was once whole, and now it would never be whole again. The boy hovered, not bound by gravity, not bound by time, not bound by anything at all. Because here, there were no boundaries. The space around him shifted, colors bleeding into shadow, darkness curling into light. Shapes flickered, uncertain, incomplete, 1,000 possibilities, 1,000 worlds, and each one waiting, each one calling. The Lich listened, not with ears, not with mind, but with something deeper, something woven into the essence of everything that had ever been. Because this was not new, not unfamiliar. It had walked these spaces before, and now it would walk them again. The portal deepened, expanded, not in size, not in distance, but in meaning. It was no longer just a passage, no longer just a threshold. It was understanding. It was possibility. It was an answer to a question the universe had long since forgotten. The boy did not struggle, did not resist, because there was nothing to fight, no force to push against, because the portal was not pulling him. He was choosing to enter. The first step did not land. The second did not either, because walking here was not movement. It was thought. It was will. It was becoming part of something larger than a single world. The air twisted. The silence cracked. And for the first time in eternity, the veil between realities was truly broken. The veil did not resist, did not shatter, did not scream as it was broken, because it had never been whole, never been solid, never been meant to last. The boy did not fall, did not rise, did not move in any way that could be understood, because here, in the space beyond spaces, motion was not a direction. It was a decision. The portal pulsed again, deeper now, wider now, not in size, but in presence. It was not a gateway, not a fracture, not a singular path. It was a web, spun between the fragile threads of reality itself. It touched everything, everywhere, every time. And now the Lich was part of it. The boy's body, if it could still be called a body, shifted. The edges blurred. Not dissolving, not vanishing, but merging, folding into the space between, becoming something that could exist where no existence was meant to be. The Lich had no need for words, no need for declarations, because there was no enemy here, no force pushing back, no walls to break down, only an opening, a bridge, a place where what was, what is, and what will be, all touched, all blended, all became one. The portal flickered, not in weakness, not in instability, but in anticipation, because it was no longer just a wound in the fabric of reality, no longer just an unseen connection between worlds. It was awake. It was aware. It had been waiting. And now it had a guide. The boy lifted his hand. Or perhaps the hand lifted him. There was no way to tell anymore, because he was no longer separate, no longer just a piece. He was the bridge, the vessel, the first ripple in an endless sea that would soon consume everything. The portal pulsed again. Once, then again. Then it did not pulse at all, because it was no longer opening. It was fully open. And through it, infinite possibilities awaited. Infinite paths, infinite worlds, and the Lich would walk them all, one by one, until there was nothing left but the whisper of its will. The boy smiled. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe there was no boy anymore. Maybe there never had been. Only the Lich. Only forever. Only the quiet unraveling of every world that had once believed itself safe. The end did not come as a battle. Did not come as fire. Did not come as a moment that could be seen, or touched, or truly understood. Because the end of something that had always been was not destruction. It was forgetting. It was fading. It was being swallowed by the silence that had waited longer than time itself. The Lich did not fight, did not rage, did not scream against the unraveling, because this was not pain, not suffering, not an ending forced upon it by something greater. It was something far worse. It was inevitability. The portal had opened. The barriers had broken. The veil between worlds had been lifted, exposing all that had been hidden. And yet nothing happened. The Lich moved through the vastness, through the spaces it had long dreamed of reaching. It stretched its will across the threads of existence, felt the weight of its influence sink into the very essence of what should never be touched. It was everywhere. It was infinite. It was unstoppable. And yet nothing changed. The boy's form had long since faded. His shape, his voice, nasal, his memories, all swallowed by the void he had once stepped into. There was no vessel anymore. No identity. No distinction between what was the Lich and what was the nothingness it had embraced. It had become part of the multiverse. It had become part of everything. But that was the mistake, because to become everything is to become nothing at all. The Lich had always been a force, a presence, a will that shaped the world, without truly being part of it. But now it was part of everything. It was inside time, inside creation, inside the very fabric it had sought to unravel. And that fabric did not care. The weight of eternity pressed down, not in punishment, not in vengeance, but in indifference, because existence did not fight back. It simply continued. It simply was. And the Lich for the first time in all of time, had no role to play. It reached for the worlds it had once sought to consume, reached for the whispers, the shadows, the fear it had once spread like a sickness through the living. But there was nothing to grasp, because fear could not exist without something to fear it. Darkness could not spread where no light remained to be swallowed, and death could not touch what was never truly alive. The multiverse did not reject the Lich, did not banish it, did not destroy it. It simply forgot it. And forgetting, in the end, was far worse than defeat. The Lich did not scream, did not beg, did not curse the fates that had bound it to the silence, because there was no voice left to do so, no will left to command, no presence left to be feared, only the fading, only the slow, unstoppable unraveling of a force that had once called itself infinite, a force that had believed it could claim everything, and in doing so had lost itself instead. The unraveling did not hurt, did not burn, did not twist with agony, because there was nothing left to feel, nothing left to break, nothing left at all. The Lich had reached beyond its prison, had broken through the walls of time, of space, of every fragile boundary that had once kept it contained. It had spread into the great beyond. It had seeped into the fabric of existence itself, and in doing so it had become nothing. The void did not welcome it, did not resist it, because the void had no will, no thought, no awareness of what had entered it. The Lich had spent eternity tearing at the edges of the universe, seeking to pull it apart, to claim it, to twist it into something that belonged only to itself. But now, there was no self left. It had always existed as something separate, a force in the dark, a whisper between worlds, a shadow that loomed over the living. But now, it was inside the dark, inside the whispers, inside the silence that stretched between moments, between thoughts, between the very concept of being, and the silence did not speak back. The Lich reached, not with hands, not with power, not with anything that could be seen or felt, because it was not a being anymore, not a presence, not even a thought, just a ripple in an endless sea that had already stilled. A long time passed, or maybe no time at all, because time itself had no meaning here, no weight, no structure to define one moment from the next. It was all the same, a vast, unbroken expanse of nothingness. No fear, no hunger, no will, only the quiet, only the waiting, only the endless hum of a universe that had no need for a Lich that no longer mattered. The final fate of the Lich was not destruction, not defeat, not imprisonment, because all those things required something to fight against, something to resist, something to remember that it had ever existed at all. But there was no memory here, no past, no future, only a vast, endless present that stretched in all directions, infinite and indifferent. And in that present, the Lich was simply gone. There was no awakening, no sudden realization, no final moment of clarity before the end, because the end had already come. And the Lich had not even noticed. The silence stretched, thick, heavy, endless. It pressed in from all sides, not crushing, not suffocating, just existing, a weight without substance, a presence without form, a thing that had always been, and would always be. The Lich had spent eternity fighting against the order of things, breaking laws of nature, twisting life into something that could never decay, never move forward, never change. It had believed itself above time, above death, above all things. But now it was beneath them. There was no throne here, no kingdom of darkness to rule over, no fear to command, no souls to devour. Because this place, this vast, endless, timeless void was not a place at all. The Lich had seen the multiverse, had touched it, had stretched itself across countless worlds, whispering ruin into the bones of every reality it could reach. And yet, all of those worlds kept turning without it. The Lich was not missed, not remembered, not even erased, because erasure required someone to look at what was there and remove it. And here, there was no one left to look. Perhaps it had expected something different, some final battle, some last moment of resistance, some clash of wills, a great force rising up as to strike it down, to claim victory over the darkness it had spent eternity spreading. But this was worse, because there was no enemy, no justice, no reckoning, just the slow, quiet unraveling of something that was never meant to last forever, something that had always been reaching for the impossible. And now it had simply slipped away. A long time passed, or maybe no time at all. It made no difference, because there was nothing left to measure it, nothing left to mark the passing of moments, nothing left to remind the Lich of what it had once been. There was only silence, only stillness, only the fading echoes of something vast, something terrible, something that had once threatened everything, but now was nothing at all. The void did not stir, did not shift, did not react in any way to the thing that had once called itself the Lich, because the void had no memory, no past, no future, no concept of what had come before, or what would come next. Only the present, only the stillness, only the unbroken silence of something that had never cared to listen. The Lich had once spoken in whispers, had spread its will through shadows, through echoes, through the fearful gasps of those who still clung to life. But here, there was no one left to whisper to, no fear left to feed upon, no life left to claim. And without those things, the Lich was nothing. It had spent so long reaching, so long grasping, tearing through walls that were never meant to break, shaping the world into something unnatural and something cold, something empty. And now, it had finally achieved what it had always sought: a world without life, a world without movement, a world where nothing changed, nothing grew, nothing decayed. But it was not a world at all, just an endless stretch of something. There was neither darkness nor light, neither existence nor oblivion, just absence. The Lich had believed it would be eternal, had seen itself as something greater than death, greater than time, greater than the fragile creatures who had once tried to stop it. And yet, it had not conquered death, had not escaped time, had not triumphed over the forces it had so desperately sought to control. It had only delayed them, stretched them thin, fought against them, until there was nothing left to fight against. And now, without anything to resist, without anything to devour, without anything to prove it had ever existed. It was simply forgotten. There was no pain, no regret, no last thoughts. Just the quiet fading chime of something that had never truly belonged in the first place. The Lich had always been an outsider, a sickness that had spread through the cracks of the universe. And now, those cracks had sealed. Oh, the sickness had passed. The wound had closed. And the Lich was gone. There was no end. No final moment. No great collapse. Because endings required something to remain afterward, a memory, a scar, a trace of what had once been. And here, there was nothing. The Lich had spent its existence chasing destruction, tearing down life, unraveling everything that stood in its way, and yet it had never once considered what came after, what remained when there was nothing left to destroy, what existed when even existence itself had no place for it. It had sought to undo the world, to erase the cycle of life, of time, of change, and in the end, it had only erased itself. The void stretched, vast, endless, unshaped. It did not shift, did not stir, did not recognize the thing that had once been a force of terror, a harbinger of ruin, a whisperer of death itself. Because the void did not recognize anything. It had no eyes to see, no mind to understand, no will to resist or accept, only presence, only stillness, only a vastness so complete, almost so absolute, that even something as terrible as the Lich meant nothing to it. There was no more reaching, no more grasping, no more hunger for something greater, something darker, something beyond, because there was nothing left to reach for, nothing left to claim, nothing left to fear it, to fight it, to even remember what it had once been. Time did not pass here, not in the way it once had. There was no before, no after, no measure of moments or meaning, only the vast, endless stretch of something that was neither silence nor sound, neither light nor darkness, neither real nor unreal, just being, just stillness, just nothing. The Lich had always believed it was beyond death, that it could never be destroyed, that no force, no hero, no power could truly end it. And it had been right. No blade had struck it down. No spell had shattered its essence. No war had claimed its throne. And yet, it was still gone, still forgotten, still lost to something it had never even considered. Not destruction, not battle, not revenge, just absent. No struggle, no resistance, no final act to reclaim its power. Because there was no power left, no self left, no purpose left. Only the slow, inevitable unraveling of something that had never truly belonged. There was no final thought, no last whisper of defiance, no flicker of self, clinging to the edges of oblivion. Because there was no self left, no edges, no oblivion, only an endless stretch of something that was neither here nor anywhere at all. The Lich had spent eternity trying to erase life, trying to undo the living, the breathing, the moving, the changing. And now, it had become the very thing it had sought to create: emptiness. No boundaries, no walls, no separation between what it had been and what it had become. Because what it had been no longer mattered, and what it had become was nothing at all. The silence pressed in, not cruelly, not violently, just endlessly, just absolutely, because silence had no will, no thought, no purpose, only presence, only waiting, only a vast, unbroken stillness that stretched in all directions, if directions even existed anymore. The Lich had been a shadow once, a force lurking beneath the surface of the world, a whisper carried on the breath of the dying, a promise of ruin, a curse that could never be lifted. And yet now there was nothing left to ruin, nothing left to curse, no breath, no world, no whisper, for it to travel on. Perhaps this was the only way that it could ever truly be defeated. Not by battle, not by power, not by force or fear, but by being left behind, by being forgotten, by being swallowed, by something so vast, so infinite, so indifferent, that even a thing as terrible as the Lich could not leave a mark upon it. There was no end, no beginning, just this, just stillness, just the quiet unraveling of something that had once sought to be eternal, but in the end had simply faded away. The Lich was no more, and nothing noticed, nothing remembered, nothing remained, only silence, only stillness, only the void stretching on, forever. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to tell, because the story of the Lich had already ended. No legacy, no memory, no lingering presence that would one day return. Just silence, just absence, just a whisper of something that had once been, but was no longer. The Lich had believed it was inevitable, that it would always return, that no force in the universe could truly erase it. But in the end, it had not been erased. It had not been destroyed. It had simply faded, lost to something greater than itself. Not a hero, and not a battle, not a moment of triumph or final defeat. Just time, just stillness, just the slow, quiet unraveling of something that had always fought against the nature of existence until at last existence had simply let it go. And so the story closes. Not with fire, not with ruin, not with the echo of a curse waiting to rise again, but with nothing. A story that once seemed endless, now reaching its final page. A voice that once whispered of death and decay, now silent. A force that once threatened all things, now forgotten. No epilogue, no aftermath, no shadow waiting at the edge of the world. Because this time, there is no return. And so the Lich, the great harbinger of destruction, the unrelenting force of death, the thing that once sought to bring an end to all things, has finally found its own. And there is nothing left. Nothing at all. Only silence. Only stillness. Only the void stretching on forever. There was no more waiting. No more watching. No more presence lurking and just beyond the edge of the world, waiting for its time to rise again. Because time no longer held a place for it. Because the world had moved on. Because even the deepest shadows eventually disappear. The Lich had always believed that death was the only true certainty, that in the end, everything, everyone would fall to it, that no matter how long it took, how hard they fought, how desperately they resisted, they would all fade, and only it would remain. But now, there was nothing left to claim. No one left to fall, nothing left to fear it. And in that moment, if moments even still existed, the Lich understood something it had never considered before. Something more final than death, something worse than destruction. something more absolute than anything it had ever inflicted on the world. Oblivion, because death was still something, still a part of the cycle, still a force that had meaning, still something that came after life, that balanced it, that gave it weight. But oblivion was outside the cycle. Oblivion did not balance life, it erased it. And it erased death, too. And it erased the Lich just as easily. There were no screams, no echoes, no last traces, lingering in the corners of time. Just stillness, just absence, just a quiet, endless void that did not know the Lich's name, did not remember what it had been, did not recognize that it had ever existed at all. Once, and there had been a great and terrible force, a thing of rot and ruin, a whisper of death, woven into the fabric of reality itself. It had spread. It had consumed. It had fought to end all things, believing itself to be eternal. And yet it was gone. And the universe continued. The stars burned. The rivers flowed. The world spun onward, unburdened, unknowing, unchanged. And the Lich, the great, unstoppable terror that once sought to end existence itself, was forgotten. There was no place for memory here, no place for echoes, no place for the weight of the past to linger, to settle, to wait for time, when it might be called upon again. Because the past no longer existed, because time itself had no meaning anymore, because there was nothing left to remember it. The Lich had spent an eternity trying to erase life, trying to unmake the world, trying to pull everything into an ending so absolute, so final, that nothing could ever return from it. And in the end, that fate had not fallen upon the world. It had fallen upon the Lich itself, no longer a force of terror, no longer a whisper of death, no longer anything at all. Because to be something, even something feared, meant to exist. And the Lich no longer existed, not in the cracks between worlds, not in the depths of forgotten places, not even as a name spoken in fear by those who still walked the land, because names required memory, and memory required something to hold it. And the Lich had left nothing behind. The world did not notice, did not mourn, did not stop turning to acknowledge that something which had once seemed unstoppable was now simply gone. Because the world had never belonged to the Lich. It had always belonged to the living, to those who built, who dreamed, who carried on, despite the weight of the past. And now, the weight was gone. The shadow had lifted. The silence had settled. And the great, unrelenting force of death was no more. No wind stirred, and no shadow loomed. No whisper of something waiting in the dark corners of existence, biding its time, preparing to return. Because there was no return. Because there was nothing left to return from. Because the story had truly, completely, finally ended. Once the Lich had spoken of the end of all things, had promised that nothing lasted, had believed that time itself would crumble before it, would bow to it, would break beneath its will. But time had not bowed. It had not broken. It had simply moved forward. And in doing so, it had left the Lich behind. There was no monument to its existence, no trace of its passage, no scar upon the world to mark where it had once stood. Because scars, at the very least, still means something was there. And the Lich was not there. Not anymore. Not anywhere. This was not a battle won. Not a triumph claimed. Not a moment of victory where the hero stands tall, looking out over a world that has been saved. Because the world had not needed to be saved. Not in the way the Lich believed. It had always been moving forward, always finding a way to exist beyond its darkest moment. And now it did so again. Because that is what life does. It continues. And the Lich, the unchanging, unyielding, unrelenting force that had sought to stop all things, could not follow. And so, this is where it ends. Not in fire, not in ruin, not in some grand clash between light and dark, but in silence, in absence, in the quiet truth that nothing, no matter how powerful and no matter how inevitable it may seem, lasts forever. The Lich is gone, and the universe does not care, because it does not need to, because it has already moved on, because it always will, and in the end, that is why the Lich was always doomed to fail, because death is only part of the story, never the whole of it, never the end, just one moment in the vast, endless unfolding of existence itself. And so, the story continues. But the Lich does not. And so the story ends. Not with a final battle, not with a lingering threat, but with silence, with absence, with the quiet truth that even the greatest darkness must one day fade. But if you've enjoyed this journey, if you want more stories to fall asleep to, more forgotten tales to drift into dreams with, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss what comes next. Because while this story may be over, there are always more waiting to be told. Sleep well.